Do you like her?
Abby, yeah.
Yeah,
You're doing the same thing you did with the Andy Andrew questions. Like, do you like this person? It's like, yeah, I like people.
Wow.
I like people.
We just started recording and I got the giggles now. Abby, tell everybody what you do around here.
Hi.
And you've been here for a good little while. You left and then came back.
I'm what we like to call a boomerang.
Mm-hmm. And you also were on the Miracle Stories podcast episode, which is just, did you know about her story?
I don't think so.
Oh, man, it's crazy. But people have to go tune into that later.
Yeah, so I work with SEU Seacoast, which is our leadership college here at church. And I get to do a little bit of everything, but I do like recruiting, enrollment, marketing, student life, hanging out with college kids.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
It's funny how Jack, the greater and the lesser, so it's the terminology that we use for the Jack that's sitting here and his father, but it played out in real time. T was a witness to it. I walk in and Abby says, which Jack? In a very nervously, and when I told her it was you, the nervousness just kind of dissipated.
Yeah.
It's not a bad nerves. It's like he's on a whole nother level.
But it just demonstrated.
You mean? I'm...
Yeah.
It just demonstrated the whole greater and lesser. No, but I will say in Abby's defense, she specifically said, no, they're both on a whole different level. So that's, she did compliment you.
I appreciate that.
So y'all know who is going to be on this episode is a guy named Michael Sweet. He is the lead singer of a band called Stryper. It's a hair band that saved my life as a kid because around the third grade, I was told that I could not listen to secular music. And my brother and I, we lived off the radio. That's what we consumed. And so when Stryper came out, it was like all the music that we listened to, Guns N' Roses, Poison, all the stuff that we couldn't listen to anymore, but it was Christian form. And these guys were ridiculously talented. They were from the streets of LA where that scene was kind of birthed. They sold 1 million copies of an album called To Hell with the Devil.
Just because I don't believe or agree doesn't mean I can't learn from you.
Why did you have to bring that up?
Okay, that one I'm super embarrassed about.
Do you like me?
Do I like you?
Yeah.
As an individual or as a podcast?
Just as a person.
No, I like you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I don't have any interest in appearing to be stronger than I am.
I ain't bow to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. He gonna lead. You feel me?
How do we love people who see the world differently than we do?
What would it look like if we truly loved all of our neighbors? Could listening to their stories be the first step? This is Seacoast Church, and there's way more to talk about.
You're going to be educated with this episode. Have you heard of Stryper?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
was this like before me?
So To Hell with the Devil, their biggest album, I think, was 86. You were born 88?
I appreciate that. 93.
93? 93.
Which this is how I feel working with college students. They're all born right now we have kids born in 2006 and 7.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in middle school.
All right, so let me put y'all to a test. See if you can guess the artist. Pour some sugar on me.
Know the song, couldn't tell you the artist.
Do you know?
I too was not allowed to listen to certain kinds of
How
music.
about if I say one-armed drummer?
Oh, Leonard Skinner.
Def Leppard.
Def Leppard, sorry. You got to cut this stuff out, man. You can't have me, giving answers that are terrible and ignorant. I'm just guessing here.
How about...
I bet your dad would have got that right.
Dad would have gotten that right.
How about every rose has its thorn? Poison. Shot to the heart, and you're to blame. You give love.
That sounds familiar.
Oh, my gosh.
I know
you
that
had
one.
named a song that's been on
Bon freaking Jovi?
Okay, sorry.
Oh, my gosh.
It was a karaoke song, though. I was like,
wow.
recognized it.
No, here's the deal. So Stryper was before me. So
Yeah.
I didn't listen to Stryper because they were a little bit, before my time. A little bit. But all the songs you're talking now, this is like the stuff that I heard in bowling alleys in the 90s.
That's true.
And so I recognized the lyrics, but I couldn't tell you who they are.
That's true. That's true. It's probably how I respond to bands in the 70s.
I don't know, man.
Similar thing. Like I probably recognize a bunch of songs in the 70s. I couldn't tell you who they are.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. All right, so I want to get like a school update and then complain with you guys a little bit on something school related. But tell me your boys and what grades they just started.
So Jack just started 5th and Luke started 2nd.
5th and 2nd. Those days have not approached you yet, Abby.
We call Little Coaster school.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
2.5 and 8 months.
2.5 and 8 months. And senior year?
Dude, 10th grade.
10th grade. I keep making your daughter older than what she is. I don't think I've ever been in her presence, actually. So 10th grade.
10th grade.
All right. So my kids, I've got one that graduated, and then I've got a 10th, 8th, and 6th grader. So one of my kids procrastinated a little bit with some summer work. And he said, and Priscilla gets irritated sometimes with my attitude that seems like I don't care about education. And it doesn't have anything to do with not valuing education. It's some of the things that are coming home. He said, Dad, the teacher I just read wants me to illustrate and make my own book cover for this book that I just read to prove that I read the book. I was like, well, first of all, that doesn't prove that you read the book. You could have just, so that's kind of weird that is in there in writing. And I said, second of all, I don't care what you draw. You can write your name on it in a smiley face. Enjoy your last day of summer. I was like, I cannot believe part of his summer work was to make a cover of a book, illustrate it. That's ridiculous. You don't think that's ridiculous for summer work? He's a middle schooler. Let him play video games and go outside and play basketball. He's got to read books.
As someone who almost failed art class, I would have
just any work
not have appreciated that specific assignment because, I almost failed middle school art class.
I just don't understand I don't understand teachers loading kids up on work when they're supposed, like I would say if schools could do their jobs effectively, and I realize it's not all the school's faults. You've got rambunctious kids and then unsupportive parents and all that. But there's a lot of time that kids are at school. It seems like if that time was used efficiently, homework wouldn't be a thing. Like, my kids come home from school, they've been stressed out of their minds from class to class, all the peer pressure and kids and how bullies can exist and everything. Then they come home and they can't just, cool, I'm home, I'm chilling, I'm going to go outside, I'm going to play. No, they have to do homework for 3 hours.
My kid's been gifted and talented since 6th grade, and she doesn't have homework. Like, unless it's a project. Projects are the only thing they have at home. They have classwork, and if they don't get their classwork done, then it's done at home. But in Berkeley County, they pretty much scrapped homework just because the parents at home weren't capable of helping teach the kids how to do it in a lot of places.
Yeah.
So,
well, but a lot of assignments come home and there's no way your child could do it. Like, God bless her. I love this kindergarten teacher, but all of my kids went through the same kindergarten teacher, and they had a project where they had to use geometric objects to build an animal. A 5-year-old. No, that means mom and dad is going to do this project. I used to get so frustrated. All right, you guys don't seem to be sharing the same fervor.
Well, there are always going to be stupid assignments in the school. The book cover, I'll tell you why the book cover one doesn't bother me terribly. It is a bit of a creative way to see if the kid read the book. Like, on Twitter, there are threads that are really funny because there's a lot of,
Priscilla's going to love you if she listens to this episode.
So listen,
right now.
there are Twitter because with, once books are in the public domain, like anyone can, print it. And when you do, a lot of places just generate covers. And so one of the recurring Twitter threads is like covers for books where the person who came up with the cover had no idea what the book is about because it has nothing to do with what the actual book is about. And so kind of if you've got to design a cover for this book, you've got one rectangle and you've got to fill it with something that tells a person what the book is about. That is a somewhat creative way to tell someone, synthesize what you read in this book in visual form. That's not a terrible assignment.
Is it a terrible summer assignment? That's what I'm really getting at.
No.
So you believe in homework in the
here's
summer?
the deal. Look, the school I went to for high school, like the summer reading list was like 12,
Abby, what do you
12
think?
books. Listen, you were talking about supportive parents a bit ago. I feel like that was a real moment of introspection for you.
I had to read the Odyssey for summer reading going into freshman year of high school.
Yeah.
And I mean, it literally took me all summer. Almost didn't even finish it, but and write a paper on it. Which I am the person though, give me a paper every single day. I will take a paper 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a hard book to read.
It is a very hard book to read.
Jumping from middle school to high school.
And I think honestly, the problem is not work comes home, how much work comes home. It's a lot of summer reading lists are not good at, here are books that will make you really enjoy reading. So the Odyssey is a great example. What they should be assigning is the Iliad, because the Iliad is a 400-page battle scene. It's literally just guys fighting for 400 pages. I remember, I read the Odyssey first, too, because I had to. And it's fine. There are parts of it that are really interesting, and then there are parts that's oh my gosh, kill me. But then I read the Iliad on my own after I graduated college. I'm like, holy crap, why in the world was this not on the list? I would have read this, boys would have been much more interested, at least, in reading this book than the Odyssey. And if the point is to get them to enjoy reading and enjoy learning, then you should be giving them things that they will want to read, and then will make them want to read something else. Not giving them a list of things that are important and therefore they have to read. That's a good way to kill any desire to read.
Yeah,
Joey, you can actually make this a teaching moment with your kid. You know what you should have did? You should have told your kid, A, first things first, go buy the Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes save lives. But B, you should have just drawn a sucker. That's it. Just put a sucker on a piece of paper.
What's the teachable moment?
He could have went and been like, here, turn it in. She would have been like, what's this mean? The book sucked. And then when she asked him what the book was about, he could have ran off the Cliff Notes, and she might have thought about never doing that again.
Yeah, well, and she'd be like, wow, I really respect he has such a firm, sharp opinion.
Or there's a note sent home asking the parents.
I think the play is
that too, maybe.
I think the play is he draws whatever he wants, turns it in. The teacher says, well, what does this have to do with the book? Then he says, oh, I thought you read it. And then just walks away.
That works too. You tell me.
I will say this, and I think as I get older, I realize just how big of a deal I think this really is. And school has a great function and it educates people. I personally think maybe the first 8-9 years of school, or maybe through 8th grade, that's what everybody needs. But you get to a point where you have a group of kids that academically flourish, and that's their thing. That's how they're going to get to where they need to go. But then you have a group of kids, and I don't know if it's changing a lot now, but I know that back in the day, if you weren't good at schoolwork, you were just seen as lesser than, not as smart, not as gifted. And what about the kid who makes straight C's and a couple of D's, but just can shred a guitar and is just like, how can you play the guitar like that? I'll never forget, meeting someone. I was freshly married, so I was early 20s, and I met another guy in his early 20s, and come to find out there's people in their high school age that can do this kind of stuff. But I mean, the dude can build a house from scratch, and I was like. And he comes across very unintelligent. He comes across kind of says words improperly, doesn't have correct grammar. He's brilliant. I wouldn't know the first thing about how to start building a house. So I do think that is a pretty big problem even today, I would guess, is that there's so many kids at school that are just continually being reinforced you're lesser than because you don't flourish in this sort of thing. Do y'all think that's a big deal?
I do think it's a big deal, but I think that in this instance, this is more of a lesson on sometimes in life you just got to suck it up and do things you don't want to do.
Oh, gotcha. Connecting it back to the...
Right,
yeah.
You got to be inconvenienced because no matter where you work growing up, there's going to be a time when you would rather do something else and you're going to have to do whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I will side with the teachers. Just for the record, I am siding with the teachers.
Education is very important.
Yes.
Well, and I know they're changing some of the lingo too. My sister-in-law, she's a teacher, and when I was in school, it was called special education. And it was like all the kids who are like dyslexic or are really bad at math, but they called it special ed. And I remember it was very much like a very easy way to bully someone of like, oh, you're in special ed classes. But like even now, like they call it learning support. And so it's not even just changing the lingo of saying learning support. It's like you just need the support in your learning, because that is what it is. They are dyslexic, so they have a harder time reading. Or like, I'm terrible at numbers. I've cried my way through every math class since ever. And like, I wish I would have had a learning support for math. It would have made all of my education when I had to take math way easier. And she does reading. She's a reading specialist, which I'm like, I'm calling you the day that I have to start teaching my kids how to read, because I do not understand English, teaching it to someone else. But even just in that lingo, it's like, I think it's shifted. And like, I don't have grade school kids yet, but I feel like in the high schoolers, the middle schoolers that I am involved with at church and stuff, like it's just changed a little bit in that lingo. Yeah. I mean, my nephew was in reading learning support, and I remember my sister being like, he's not special, he doesn't need the help. I'm like, actually he does, and that's okay. That's why they found it in first grade, and now they can like try and help him learn how to read, and he's in 8th grade and on the same level as other 8th graders now because they had those resources.
Yeah, for sure. So a little shout out to my mom. Check this out. So me and my brother, we both started in the first grade. Do y'all remember reading groups? And so we had 3 different reading groups. And what was so funny is everybody knew, and they had nicknames for them, like the Bears, the Wolves, the Lions, or whatever. Everybody knew. The Lions, for instance, those were the smarter kids. And then everybody knew the lowest reading group, too. It was like, it wasn't a mystery. You're like, I was in the lowest reading group, first grade. So was my brother. And my mom, a school teacher, was like, nope, not going to be in the lowest reading group. My brother ends up being valedictorian of his high school class. And I ended up getting a little bit better. No, shout out to my mom. I think by the 2nd grade, I was in the highest reading level. But the irony with my irritation of what I see as like inefficient use of time, I was a school teacher for 5 years, and I'm required to teach math standards. Did y'all know, and I don't know if it's the case now, but when I was a teacher, there was a standard, and it's called box and whiskers. So it's
cats?
It is a way of laying out information that I don't think I have ever seen in real deal life. And I had to teach these kids, no, here's what this means. And when the lines are connected, and I'm like, I don't really know how you're going to use this. But it was a math standard. So anyway, moving on, 2 weeks ago, people heard some pretty deeply troubling stories, troubling in the details, but as far as looking at how God birthed a lot of good out of them, but just a lot of the tragedies or close calls with tragedies that the Surratts went through when they first moved here in Charleston, mainly a horrible car wreck that came close to costing 2 of the kids' lives, and then a jet ski accident with Jessica. But a few things that after having the conversation with Pastor Josh, Pastor Greg, and Jenny, I was like, I want to ask some of the host crew some questions about it. So first of all, it really gave me chills. And I told them up front, I was like, I'm going to be digging a little bit deeper into the details. But if you know how Pastor Greg operates, he's not always going to pay attention to all the work. And he's really good just right off his feet coming into situations. Some people like to look through notes and see exactly what we're going to talk about. That's not his style. But how those 3 were talking about the accident, like one of them literally said, Jenny, weren't you yelling like, get off me, or, because the car had flipped or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds like they're talking about this for the first time. It was crazy. And I did feel bad because I feel like Pastor Greg was a little emotionally unprepared because but it probably took him by surprise too. But Unbelievable what they went through. A question that I asked them, and I was really interested in Pastor Greg's answer. And once again, and I won't go into the other time, but once again, theologically, I'm like, man, there's so many things Pastor Greg says that makes me feel normal, because I'm like, wow, I thought that I was the only weirdo that thought of things this way. But I asked him if he thought that spiritual warfare could have been involved in basically maybe the enemy having a hunch, oh man, they're going to start a church. This guy seems to have God's anointing on him. We got to stop this. Like, we got to make life miserable for this family. So they get back home to Illinois and shut down Seacoast. And I asked them if they felt like spiritual warfare maybe was playing into it in that regard. And Pastor Greg's answer, just immediately, I do not think about the enemy. And he didn't denigrate people that do. He just said, I don't. And basically, Jesus is victorious. That's who my eyes are on, which I thought such a testament to this church and how beautiful it is, because there are a lot of people that are family, that are connected just like any of us, who pay a lot of attention to demons. You know what I'm saying? And they have a home here too. But the lead guy who started this, his answer was, I do not think about the enemy. How does that land on you guys?
The knee-jerk reaction is that his focus is where it needs to be. Like, you can't focus on two things. So if he's focused on God, he can't focus on anything else. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I listened to the podcast, and
I just realized nobody's going to challenge Pastor Greg's theology right now.
Hey, I'm in a small group. I say all kinds of stuff that I'm just like, But I mean, I think that's great, man. Like, I feel like more times than not, we give the devil more credit than he deserves.
Yeah, and I feel like I came from what I would call a lot of unhealthiness, Pentecostalism. It's also some of the most beautiful times of my life in church community, but there were some unhealthy things to where I almost feel like the Holy Spirit calmed my spirit one time and said, Joey, that's the environment that you came out of, where everyone was always freaked out about evil spirits this, the devil's doing this, and you just let the enemy in. Joey Svendsen, this is God. You don't have to mess with any of that stuff. Like, just, you came out of that environment. Some people can dabble in that and maybe keep it balanced. Just don't even worry about it. And I really feel like the Spirit gave me that. And I think maybe there are people who should think a lot about spiritual warfare. What do you think, Jack? How does that answer land on you for him to say, I don't even think about the enemy?
Well, I mean, kind of like you're saying, it's like, it's like, boy, I really wish people thought about Satan more. It's just I think, so, I do think that it's really easy. There's a lot of things like this. Like I think end time stuff is like one of these things where it's really easy to get kind of, super interested and a little bit obsessed with things because they're different and they're, kind of a little bit weird and, they're really interesting. And like the reality is the Bible doesn't have a ton to say about like angels and demons. Like, it just doesn't. Like, they're there. But the Bible's not like, all right, let's talk about this. Here's who these guys are. Here's what they're like. There's not. And I think that, like you, kind of like you were saying with your background, people who, well, I don't want to say people who, when you, really spend a lot of time thinking about that sort of thing, you're just going to gravitate towards it more and more because that's where your mind dwells. And I think one of the things that Pastor Greg's probably getting at is what's the use? Like, I'm not calling. Jesus won the victory, and I trust in that. I was not at his side when he did it, and I'm not really called to be his chief lieutenant drawing up battle plans. And I think that's sometimes how we think about it is, I'm going to go take ground from the enemy. No, you're not, right? It's like if Jesus is at the right hand of God right now. He is already reigning, so everything belongs to him. He doesn't need you to take any ground. You be faithful to what he is calling you to do. And I think that's one of the things that, about the Surratts and about Seacoast is, they are, Greg and I think Josh are really good at hearing where God wants to lead them next and then following, right? And that does not mean, all right, we're going to take some strongholds. It's like if strongholds are going to be taken, like that's what God's going to do, and he's going to do it if he wants to do it. But I think just this posture of this very, militaristic, Christians are, warriors, and we're going to go fight the enemy, that's not really what we're called to do. It's not even really the posture, that's not even the posture that Jesus has when he confronts demons. He doesn't go looking for him. He is, he responds to them like he responds to finding illness or death. Right? But he doesn't take this antagonistic stance towards demons he meets. It's very much not casual, but just like, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't belong here.
Yeah.
And so I think there is the awareness, like I think as Peter talks about, like the devil is a lion, right? He seeks to devour you. You should have that awareness. You shouldn't dismiss him like he's like, like if you ever like heard like, Satan's a punk. Like when I was in college, that was like a thing that people would say. That's a dumb thing to say. It's just a silly thing to say.
At the ARC conference, and I did not get fired for this, but there's picture proof. There was a guy in the parking lot. You know how ARC conferences are. I mean, it's evangelical Disney World sort of thing. Is that fair enough to say?
Sure.
So basically there's a guy and he's airbrushing shirts. And so I got him to airbrush Satan is an something whole, but the word, and I didn't get fired. I just wore that around the conference. Go ahead, Jack. Just wanted to throw that in there. It was funny.
I'd like to see that make an appearance at the next All Staff.
Yeah. So
Wouldn't you agree,
silly.
though? Wouldn't you agree? Just a straight up butthole. Just go ahead, Jack.
I just think it's a dumb thing. Yeah.
Did I ruin your train of thought?
No. It was
I really
pretty
like
much.
what you're saying. By the way,
the train had come to the station. It's just I got off the train and I'm like, where is this?
I love what you're saying, and I mean what it made me think of, and I know it doesn't apply to any and every scenario. I mean, if somebody is being plagued by demons or demon possessed or something, but when it comes to me, like if there is a relationship between the Holy Spirit and I that is equal, and according to Jesus, even more valuable than what the disciples had with Jesus at the time, if the enemy has anything to say or do in my life, I don't have anything to say to them. It's like I'm thinking of Jesus right beside me. I'm like, take it up with him. Like, I'm doing my life. Jesus and I are connected. The Holy Spirit lives in me. You do as you wish, but I serve God and God's got my back. But I'm not saying that my approach is right. It could be a blessing God has given me because of weakness. You got any thoughts on this, Abby?
I just
think coolest name at Seacoast? Abby Love.
I do have the best last
name. It is
name.
the best name.
Shout out to my husband.
Yep. When you realized you were going to marry him, were you thinking, oh man, I had nailed the name? Did it have anything to do with your yes?
So actually, when we met, the very first thing that he said to me, because I asked him his name, I was working at Rusty Bull, Jenny's husband's brewery, and asked him like, oh, do you have a tab open? He's like, yeah. I was like, what's the last name? He said Love, and I just kind of looked. I was like, oh, that's cool. And he goes, do you know anyone looking for a good last name? And it was just I was like, laughed about it. And then he always just calls me a sucker because he's like, you're the first girl to fall for that line. I was like, we dream about the last names that we're getting. And that was awesome.
Nice flirt move.
You literally married for love.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all, given that his background at a brewery and your connection to it, did you know there is a beer called The Love, and it is one of my favorite beers?
I do not.
Special order it. Ask those guys to special order it.
Well, we named my son's name's Wild Air Love. Love. Just going to live into it.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. No, I think my first thing is, or my only thing that I was thinking of is I hope that if anything like that happened to me or my family, I hope that I would have a strong enough faith and trust in the Lord that my instincts would be, my whole life would be pointed towards Jesus and standing firm in my faith in who God is and his protection rather than living in the opposite. And so who's to say like what would happen, but I really hope that my faith is strong enough that if something like that comes up, I am not giving the devil more credit than he deserves, and I am fully relying on God than dwelling in the what could have been, what was that, and just being like, thank you, God, for protecting us. So
yeah,
I hope that never happens, but at the same time, that's what I like.
Yeah, and you said that, and it reminds me of, it was, I think, Peter that walked out to greet Jesus and the storm, and he takes his eyes off of Jesus. So you mean to tell me we're supposed to be not afraid of storms, but afraid of Satan? You know, or don't be afraid of storms, but be afraid of demons? No, I'm going to have the same attitude towards a storm or towards a demon than I will with a storm. All right, so I'm gonna end things with a new segment that I'm going to do. And it's even going to have its own music, and it's called
a little jingle.
Yeah, and it's going to be called Fun Facts with Freddie.
Why did you gesture to me?
Because I want to know what you think of the name of the segment.
I'm not Freddie. Who's Freddie?
I'm Freddie. Like, this is my segment, so it's kind of like I'm taking on a character.
Is Freddie like your middle name?
No, I just like the name. So it's like, so it's just like a segment, and it rings a bell.
Why would you give it a name that has nothing to do with anything or anyone?
Because it rhymes with, isn't it onomatopoeia? Isn't that what it's called? No, alliteration. Fun Facts Freddie. All starts with F. What is that called? What is that called, Jack? Is that
So it's an alliteration.
I think it's alliteration. But why not then Fun Facts for Freddie?
Why not just Fun Facts? It's just so ridiculous.
Because it's for the kids.
So why not Fun Facts with Phineas?
Okay,
why not Jokes with Joey?
Jokes with Joey.
It's just the worst.
Can y'all tell me what onomatopoeia is? Do y'all remember that?
Isn't an onomatopoeia a thing?
I don't think so either.
Isn't an onomatopoeia a word that sounds like what it is? Like drip kind of sounds like the sound that water makes. Isn't that what an onomatopoeia is?
Yeah, I think so. All right, so Fun Facts with Freddie?
No.
Joyful Jokes with Joey.
All right,
now taking name suggestions.
So angry right now. This is so dumb.
Gen Zers are calling. Talk about angry. Watch him get angrier, and I'm not lying. Guarantee. Gen Zers are calling out the popular Y'all watch Jack. The popular thumbs up emoji for being rude and hostile, even saying they feel attacked whenever they see it used in the workplace. On Reddit, younger users shared their discomfort, especially in professional settings, preferring heart emojis or verbal responses like great or thanks. Older workers said that they use the thumbs up in work-related chats to signal I approve or I understand and will obey.
I will obey?
Yeah, basically somebody is saying if my boss says, hey, do such and such, and I give a thumbs up, that's basically saying, okay, got it, sort of thing. Do you have any problem in this PC culture saying that's the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard of in your life? Like, would y'all say that is just so ridiculous that people are saying the thumbs up
that is
violent?
Bare minimum that we are asking from our students. So if we can get them to actually respond more than just a thumbs up. So I don't know who they're polling.
Isn't that insane though?
Well, pretty much anything that anyone looks at right now and says, I felt attacked is stupid. I can't remember the last thing where someone said I felt attacked. I'm like, boy, I bet you did. That's really not okay. I just,
well, I saw someone. I saw a woman on.
It doesn't even make me mad. It's just silly. It's just more silliness in a very silly culture.
I saw a woman on Instagram, and it was such a moving thing that she said, and it basically said, none of us have any sort of right to say that we get to go through life without getting our feelings hurt, without being distressed. Basically all these things that we're teaching the younger generation, you should avoid these and stay away from anybody that would cause these sorts of emotions. Like, nobody in this life is basically given that. You don't get to have life where you don't get your feelings hurt, and that's all right. Maybe this will be a little happier.
I'm not convinced that was either a fact or fun. So none of the Fs that you have used are true yet.
What about my name?
No, it's not.
Jokes with Joey is more in the lead for a title.
So what's one of the characters on Friends? What's one of them?
Joey.
I know that. I've never seen an episode, but I know that.
Okay, but that's not his real name. That's his character name. He has a real name. Freddie's my character name.
You know, as upset as the Gen Z thing made me, I'm mad at you right now.
The star Sirius B is so dense that a handful of it weighs about 1 million pounds. Is that not crazy? My gosh.
Who weighed that?
The star Sirius B is so dense that a handful of it weighs about 1 million pounds.
Have we made it to the star Sirius B yet?
This is science.
Okay, this is like someone invited me over for dinner so they could share a bunch of things that they could have just put on social media.
That can't be a fact.
It's like you're reading your Twitter thread.
Someone could have said that, and then
Lions,
who's going to debate them?
And bears, Abby.
Listen, we're going to make it. Just keep going. Push through.
Listen to this. Bears, tigers, and lions are typically seen as fierce rivals in the world. However, Leo the lion, Baloo the bear, I'm getting the giggles again, but this is a true story, and Shere Khan the tiger share an extraordinarily bond forged from a shared experience of trauma. Their story began in 2001 during a police raid on a drug dealer's home in Atlanta, Georgia. In the basement, we'll be showing pictures on YouTube of these three adorable animals chilling because they're best buddies.
I swear, I was thinking the same thing.
Well, that's it. I'm like, what is happening?
Authorities discovered 3 scared and malnourished cubs. They're dubbed the BLT, bear, lion, tiger. The trio found sanctuary at Noah's Ark Wildlife Sanctuary in Georgia. Despite their natural instincts as predators, they remained inseparable companions since their cubhood. Living together in the same enclosure, they defied expectations and formed an enduring family unit. And there's pictures of a bear,
so not
a
the
tiger,
Jungle Book.
and a lion.
This is like a real life thing.
Real deal. Huh. And it's beautiful. These 3 animals that you would think would want to fight, they're all hanging out. Wasn't that a great segment? You just learned a heartwarming story about a lion and tiger bear, basically small group. And then you learned about a really cool science thing. And then we got to learn about Gen Z. And
I can't think of any other way I could have used that 5 minutes. It's true.
You didn't think it was interesting? I need y'all's feedback for this.
I'm kind of lost.
This is a new segment.
You know, I was reading this book. It's the Bible, the Tribble, and it talks about just not believing everything that people tells you.
Yeah.
And you got to do your own research. I don't know if I believe that star weighs whatever it weighs because no one's ever been there, ever.
Yeah, but you can study stars.
But how can you study weight?
Study weight?
You said that so much of it weighed so many pounds.
Well,
if no one has ever been there, we don't even know the true size of it.
Cue the closing music, please, so that T and I's argument here can close the episode.
How?
They know stars. They know how stars work, and so they can figure out somehow gas density. I mean, it's how we learn about the solar system.
All right, so let me ask you a question. Name the stars.
You're asking the wrong person, by the way, because I'm not a scientist. Go ahead.
Have we ever made it to a star?
Oh, no, you'd burn up. I know that. I know you'd burn up.
Then how do we know how much it weighs?
And why do I need to know it?
Because it's fascinating.
I'm saying there's a limit.
Handful of a star weighing millions of pounds.
I can only keep so much stuff in here, and now that's there, and I didn't need it to be there.
All right, let's see. That was great, guys.
Was it?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. Well, man, it is good to have you on here. We have talked before, but you are a very famous guy, so I don't expect you to remember me. I say that because I may tell you some stories that you're like, that sounds familiar. Well, it's because you've heard some of them.
Okay, nice.
So I think this is a unique episode for our listenership. It's for people who have no connection with the 80s and the metal scene. Sometimes it's fun just to dive in and take in a very unique culture that I was a big fan of, but I could only listen to Christian music. So you guys were it for me. And then it turned into all these other metal bands. But I would say, I was trying to think of an analogy, Michael, and I said, you were to me what New Kids on the Block was to all of the girls that I were friends with in middle school.
Okay, fair enough. I understand that example. Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. I find it interesting that, for some people growing up, we were the only band they could listen to. And for other people growing up, their parents wouldn't let them listen to us. And I'm talking about a Christian household, because we were too radical or, to this or to that. And it's just very interesting to hear those stories, you know?
It is interesting. My parents, who I think they would even refer to themselves as very conservatively minded Christians, they weren't seen like that at the church I grew up in because of them letting us listen to Stryper and all these other Christian metal bands. Like, they were seen as, oh, wow, they parent kind of edgy, which is ironic because lyrically, you guys were very Christian. All of it was very positive. I mean, the name of Jesus all throughout verses and all of that. So yeah, we'll get into that just a little bit. But let me tell you 3 stories. One is, I was in the Stryper fan club, and I remember coming home from school one day. And I knew it. I was like, I think it was like a Cub Scout sleepover. I was like, I know it's going to be canceled because it's out, it's raining outside. And I was so bummed. And my mom was like, yeah, it's canceled. And she said, but that bandana that didn't come in with the initial package from the Stryper fan club, it came in today. And I was like, yes, it turned my day back into a good day. So,
my gosh.
And then one of my favorite stories to tell is, so I was probably in the 4th grade, and there were some things going on in our household, nothing super serious, but things that would definitely make for a heavier mood. And my mom said, boys, I want you to put "To Hell with the Devil's Song" in the stereo, and I want you to blare it as an act of spiritual warfare.
You know what? A lot of those songs had an anointing on them. And all kidding aside, it is an act of, spiritual warfare in terms of the anointing, battling that. So I believe it. I think that your mom was very smart to say that and to use that as an example, and hopefully it worked.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. I think here's a big lesson that I learned because I was super impressionable, and I'll never forget in youth group. Again, my parents were seen as kind of the radicals. They let their kids listen to all that Christian metal stuff. But this lady saw...
How dare they?
Right.
How dare they?
Right. My parents, my gosh. And so this lady at youth group saw me wearing a Stryper shirt, and she kind of piped up at the end, and we didn't even really know who she were. I guess that's how loosey-goosey our youth group structure was, because here was someone who we didn't even know who she was, and she was able to just say whatever she wanted to say. She said, I see some kids wearing some Stryper shirts. And I'm almost saying exactly what she said, and I know you've heard this stuff before, and I want you to unpack it a little bit, how y'all had to deal with this stuff. But she literally says, well, I just want you to know that these guys will have a concert, talk about Jesus, and then they'll go into the green rooms or whatever she referred to them and have sex with young teenage girls. And I'll never forget going to my parents. I'm like, Mom and Dad, I was like, it rocked my world, like absolutely rocked my world. And my parents, it was such an unbelievable lesson because they were like, well, who is she? Like, why would you listen to her? Like, and it was like, oh, okay, this woman came with a lot of authority. She was very bold and persuasive, and she didn't say, I heard, or this could be true. It was, this happened. And so as a kid, I was like, well, I guess this stuff just happens. But did rumors like that, was it a constant?
Here's the thing. God looks at your heart, and, He goes by that. Our hearts were pure. All we wanted to do was serve Christ. People like that, I'm not God. I can't say definitively this is going to happen, but I would certainly be fearful for them of the possibility of this happening, of them when they stand before God someday, they may hear the words, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." And they're so about the outside versus the inside, and making a statement and judging. And standing against everything that they feel is wrong, when the reality is most of what they're doing is wrong, but they can't see that. They're so blinded by their hate, their judgmental attitudes, whatever it is. And I find it very interesting. A lot of people really use that when I tell people, don't judge. We're supposed to love them, not supposed to judge them. They throw the scriptures around about it. Well, yes, we are supposed to judge them. And it's so taken out of context and so twisted. Everyone kind of does that. They kind of write their own Bibles. And it's really interesting how that works. I guess we all do it to some degree.
Right.
But it doesn't make it right.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, so the culture back then, it was something else. And I can understand how a lot of these people who were being introduced to the metal scene through me and my brother listening to Stryper, they're like, what's up with the makeup? What's up with the long hair? To us Southerners, it was basically the question, why are they dressed like girls? And I'm curious what was behind that. So was it something along the lines of like a punk rocker shaving their head or indie kids having piercings all over? Was it kind of like we're punk rock, but we're metal? Like, this is what we do, sort of in your face.
I'll tell you what it was. We didn't think about it.
Yeah.
In other words,
I love that.
We were raised on the streets of LA playing clubs. But I was playing clubs when I was 14 and 15 years old. And that's all I knew. So I didn't sit down when I became a Christian and when Stryper dedicated the band to Christ. We didn't all sit down and say, okay, so how do we look? What do we need to do to capture the eyes and ears of those kids? Let's see. Well, what about, we didn't do that. We just kept being ourselves. And unfortunately, sadly, a lot of people came against us for that. One of the more famous names that came against us, we all know Jimmy Swaggart. He was literally holding up our records and calling us wolves in sheep's clothing and coming out and protesting our shows, trying to deter people from going. And we would always go out and invite him and his group. Well, he was never there. Invite his group in to come see us. I'd always say, have you ever seen us? And they'd say, no. And I'd say, well, how can you be out here protesting something you don't know anything about? Mm-hmm. And I said, why don't we educate you? Why don't you come in and see the show? And then protest if you want. And sometimes they would, most of the time they would not. But anyway, we all know what happened eventually to Jimmy Swaggart. Mm-hmm. Here's the man who's accusing us of doing something, and he's doing something 100 times worse.
Right.
And this is what's happening in our world and in the church. It's this judgmental attitude when people need to look in their own closets and clean the mud and the dirt out of their closets.
Yep, that plank.
Deal with that first.
Yep, that big old
plank. You'll spend a lifetime doing it.
That's such a good point, for sure. We have enough of our own stuff to deal with. My gosh.
I mean, it's so true. But you see, we all miss that because we're so laser focused on other people.
Yep.
We fail to see our own faults and shortcomings. And boy, we all have many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, so for those, especially a younger generation who's listening to the podcast, but, I would say, there's probably a lot of people who haven't heard of Stryper. There's a lot of people who have, but for our listeners' sake, just so you understand the level of exposure that you guys had, y'all were at one point correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say one of the most famous in that scene at the time. And I don't mean one of the most famous Christians. Y'all obviously had that occupied. Y'all were by far the most famous Christian metal band, but y'all had number one hits on the radio, on MTV. To Hell with the Devil sold a million. I mean, way more than a million.
It's sold, to date, we're probably on that album alone in the 4, maybe even 5 million range, but it's not certified. It was certified double platinum.
Gotcha.
But that was back in the late 80s.
Right. Right. That's a long time ago.
So-
and now with downloads and all that stuff, just for some fun, this will, for a lot of our listeners, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, okay, now I get it. Give some rundown of some bands that you guys played with through the years and the LA scene.
Well, I mean, we played with Bon Jovi. We played with Poison. We played with Rat. We played with White Lion. We played with, Dio. We played with Kiss. We played with Priest. The list goes on and on. We played with pretty much almost every band in that genre. And it's just because God opened those doors and we decided to walk through those doors. And to this day, we still do that. We go and play festivals where there's not one Christian band. And that's our calling. That's what we do. That's the whole point of what we do. And we take a lot of heat for that. How can you call yourself a Christian and go out and play with this, and that band? And it's like, well, don't you get it? That's exactly what Jesus did.
And that's exactly the same flack he got. They're still offering the same flack.
What's the definition of insanity?
Right, for sure.
Right?
Yeah. And one thing that I thought was neat, and it was the first time I experienced this as a real young Christian boy, because again, I was in elementary school, and that was nobody could listen to, so all my friends are listening to Bon Jovi and Poison and all of that, and when I would let them listen to Stryper, a lot of them had already heard you guys on the radio, but there was no step down. Like oftentimes, sorry to say, but it feels like, especially when Christian music tries to produce music following the lead of what's hip and more popular on the radio, then it kind of seems second rate. And you guys, it was far from it. I mean, just absolutely far from it. I'll
say this. Let me just elaborate on that. And when I say something like this, it might come across as egotistical. I hope it doesn't. I'm just speaking openly and honestly. We went above the call of duty with every album, and we still do. And what I mean by that is it's never good enough. You don't hear the words, that's good enough in our camp. Ever. It can always be better. We strive for being better. And we know that God's put that on our hearts and put that within us. And I always use the term, the best is yet to come. I really believe that. Even though I'm going to be 61, who cares? We could deliver our best record when I'm 81, Lord willing. But my point is, I think our albums even surpassed some of those albums that were all over the charts. The Bon Jovis and the Poisons and the Motley Crues and whatever. If you put our album To Hell with the Devil side by side, it holds its own and maybe even then some. And that's because we worked so hard to make it the best it could be.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I hope it doesn't come across silly, but I do want to honor you. And I think my parents would agree that when they found themselves very convicted by not allowing my brother and I to listen to secular music, it was a really big deal because we were really into music. And so Stryper was and I know you hear it 100 times, but it was our gateway into 8 years of really good Christian music listening. You guys led us to other directions. And, once we went off to college, we kind of expanded our music listening. But just a shout out to you, man. I appreciate that. So what I would love to do for the rest of our time is I want to ask you one question about the grunge scene. And then I just want to go through 4 of your songs real quickly. Hopefully, I don't know how complicated this gets, Michael, but hopefully we can play a clip of these songs like once we put the episode out.
Yeah.
But it seems like, so I want to talk grunge music. It seems like when you look at the amount of time between arguably one of the biggest metal albums at the end of the 80s, Appetite for Destruction, we were just talking Guns N' Roses. I want to say 2 years later, Smells Like Teen Spirit comes out, Nirvana, Kurt Cobain. Was that one of the fastest shifts in the music scene? Because it really did feel like someone told me recently that you're most impressionable, or you go back mostly to the music you listened to in high school. So for me, that would be the grunge scene. So it's almost like we crossed that line quickly, my brother and I. You know, we still listen to a little bit of metal, but it was like, man, all this raw stuff, you know, coming out of Seattle. That's the big craze. We're in high school, everybody's listening to it. Was that super fast for you guys too? How did it affect y'all? Like,
it was. And I mean, oddly enough and interestingly enough, we were drawing to an end anyway, pre-grunge.
We as in the scene, or you guys as in Stryper?
The band.
Yeah, gotcha.
I mean, sadly, we were going down that road that the woman was talking about, that they're going backstage and sleeping with teenage girls. I mean, we were kind of, getting too close to that.
Right.
It never played out like that, but we started drinking and started, having girls on the bus, and, our marriages almost ended. I talk about this in my book. This was around 1990, 91. And we broke up in 92. That was our demise, because we were literally complete hypocrites at that time. We'd go on stage and sing about Jesus and go off stage and do something else. And I didn't want any part of it anymore. My family was more important to me than a band. And I left the band in 92 because I wanted my family to survive. And I wouldn't do it any other way. I have no regrets. I'm glad I did that. And that was right at the same time Nirvana was coming out. And I remember when I saw the Nirvana video, I went immediately, I kid you not, and I bought the album.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. Call me weird. The reason why I liked it is I'm not just a metalhead. I like all genres of music. If it's a good song, if it moves you, it's a good song. That song moved me. I got it. It was energetic, powerful. It made me go, whoa, wow, What's this? I got it. So I went and got the album. I took it to Stryper rehearsal, played it for the guys. They were all like, it's okay. Yeah, I don't get it, but whatever. And I loved it. I hate the labels. I'm not a fan of labels. To me, grunge was just rock. Just a different interpretation of it.
Sure. Yeah.
But, grunge, metal, thrash, blah, blah, blah. It's all rock or metal. And it's like, there's too many genres for me.
Yeah.
But man, I did like that when we moved into that type of music. I got it totally.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, let's go all the way to Yellow and Black Attack. That's the first album, correct? First album as Stryper.
First album, which was actually an EP. It was only it consisted of 6 songs.
Yeah,
the first release of it. Yes.
And so the 4 main guys, you and your brother Robert, Tim Gaines, and Oz Fox, were y'all already a band? Then you become Christians and you change your band's name. How did that go? Just a little snapshot because we're going to move along here quickly.
Basically, we were called Rock's Regime. And we had a few friends come and witness to us and share the gospel with us. And we had seen what God did in their lives, complete turnaround. And we were believers. Rob and I grew up in the church. I got saved when I was 12. And I walked away. And then we rededicated our lives when I was 20. So God was knocking on my heart for a long time. And instead of waiting for the other guys, I just started rewriting all the lyrics. And I said, man, I'm doing this. And then Robert said, let's do it. And Oz was a little more hesitant. He wasn't really into it, from what I recall, as much as Rob and I. And then eventually he got more into the idea. And Tim, Dad was a pastor. And he left Stormer because he wanted to devote his life to God. So once we found Tim, it was complete.
Man.
We decided to change the name to Stryper, and the rest is history, as they say.
Man, that's cool. And did you guys adopt it? from my memory, if my memory recalls correctly, it felt this way. But did y'all adopt like a really evangelist mindset? Like, hey, our mission is to bring more people to the Lord, because the art never took a hit. It was always top notch. But was your frame of mind more, hey, we're spreading the gospel now?
100%. But it was never churchy.
Right.
Meaning, when you came to a Stryper rehearsal, you wouldn't hear me or Oz or Rob or Tim say, "Praise the Lord, brother, come in, here's a Bible, have a seat." It was never like that. It was never, fill out the little card at the back of the garage and, leave your name and we'll be calling you. It wasn't like that at all. It was just, we were a rock band. Like, hey, what's up, bro? Dude, come on in, man. Oh, it's awesome. Wow. Are you kidding, bro? Oh, it was like that.
Right.
Yeah. But we had hearts that wanted to just serve, and we weren't really knowledgeable. We were young, impressionable, and we just wanted to lay it all at his feet and say, Lord, use us as you see fit. Do with us what you want, Lord, and we're yours, and we give it all to you. And we still say that to this day.
Yeah. The song in the background, "Reason for the Season," it appeared on I remember a cassette where there were two songs, and it was like a little Christmas cassette. Was this song originally intended for a song surrounding Christmas themes? Because it's called "Reason for the Season."
I think what happened was we had the idea to re-release that, remix it, and re-release the EP. We weren't real happy with the original raw mix, but yet now, interestingly enough, somehow it's turned out to be the favorite, and it's mine too. But we went into re-record, and we added "My Love Will Always Show," a remake of that. Originally, it was heavy. We did a remake of that, like a ballad, and then it was close to Christmas time, and I thought, hey, let's do a Christmas song. We did "Reason for the Season."
Yeah.
Very interesting.
All right, one of my favorites, the sing-along song. I know this is an eternity ago, but I'm curious, do you still remember some of the songwriting process? Like, I'll just tell, you can hear it in the background, like the harmonizing. You guys are rivaling Beach Boys here. Like, just unbelievable. Who all is singing? Like, is this Michael Sweet? Is this you mixed in all the harmony, or do some of the other guys sing?
No. Oz sings too. And a lot of the harmonies that you hear on most of the records through the years are Oz and I.
Okay.
But when we hear a big group thing, that would involve Tim sometimes, Robert even sometimes, although Rob's not really a singer. Oz and I, for the most part, did most of the stuff. Now we have a bass player by the name of Perry Richardson, and he's a great singer too.
Gotcha.
So we do all those harmonies, 3-part harmonies, and we grew up on the Beach Boys, on Queen, on the Bee Gees. I always loved harmonies. I would listen to Priest and Van Halen, and then I would throw on a Bee Gees album.
Yeah.
It's just how I grew up. I love harmonies, guitar harmonies, Thin Lizzy. Anything that had a harmony is like, ooh, that's cool. And you hear that in our music as well.
Yeah. So do you remember some of the stories behind, or I'll put it this way, do you remember back in the day kind of having a moment where it all connects? Like for the sing-along song, for instance, did you come up with some of the music first and you're like, man, I like the and just start singing to that, and then let's call it the sing-along song? Do you remember some of how those songs came about?
I had a Roland keyboard. I bought a keyboard at a music store when I was during the Soldiers album, right around that time. And I wanted to incorporate keyboards more. So I bought a keyboard. I wasn't a keyboard player, and I would use that to help me write songs. And there was a patch on a keyboard that when you held it down, it was a sequence, and it would just go dun 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 dun. And I'm like, ooh, that's cool. And I kind of wrote the song based off of that keyboard part. Same thing with all the ballads, honestly. Together as One. Even Holding On, some of the poppier songs, Calling on You, Always There for You. There was always a keyboard incorporated.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. So I don't know if you would consider this the biggest hit, or at least the one that is most well known on a casual look, but To Hell with the Devil. Once y'all landed on the fact that, hey, we're going to write a song called To Hell with the Devil, we're going to call the album To Hell with the Devil, was there any of you that felt for a bit a little hesitant, like, oh man, is this too edgy? Or once y'all had the idea, you're like, this is exactly what we're going to do? Was there any conflict of interest amongst the members?
No, not really. I mean, we were always a little apprehensive about certain things we were doing because we didn't know if it would work or how it would be accepted, but we didn't let that stop us.
Yeah. You're like, Joey, this is 40 years ago, by the way. You're asking some details about 40.
Well, it's all right, man. But, you know, specifically, we don't run from controversy. You know, we're not sitting around trying to come up with things that are controversial to use for our benefit, but yet we don't run from controversy. And we had an album called Goddamn Evil, and a lot of people freaked over that. And we were explaining that, and if you just read the lyric, you'll get it. You'll totally get what it means. But you know, people are just. It's hard for people to change and to open their minds to new things. Even myself, you know, when I see something or hear something, I'm like, oh gosh, you know, what are they doing? And then the more I think about it, I think, well, you know, that's actually kind of cool. I understand that, and I think we need to all be a little bit more open-minded with things in this world.
Yep. And then maybe my personal all-time favorite. It's just such a beautiful song, and it was touching back in the day, and it still is now. Always There for You from In God We Trust. We'll wrap it up with a question about this song, and then I have a question I would like to end with, so you could offer some of the wisdom that you've acquired over the years to all of our listeners. But Always There for You, such a great song. I'm curious, has your belief in God's love deepened over the years?
Absolutely. In a very unique way. What I mean by that, not necessarily by reading a million books or, you know, in terms of being book smart on a deeper level, but more so on a personal level. My faith has deepened and grown because of things that I've gone through. You know, I've gone through a lot over my lifetime. And it somehow strengthened my faith and my belief in God. And I'm very fortunate because sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes if you lose somebody, for example, we tend to turn from God and blame God. And I'm kind of built differently. It made me want to draw closer to God and almost prove the enemy wrong. You know, that was my thinking. More determination to follow my calling. You're not going to stop me. You know, you're not going to stop me, devil. It's not going to work. And that's kind of how I think.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, why don't you leave us with, and I talked to your agent. Hopefully he followed up with you, because this is tough stuff to think off the top of your head, but you're also a very gifted guy, so you may not have any problem. But the 3 biggest lessons, you're a loving guy, you love people. What are some lessons you hope people figure out as early as they can here in this life?
Well, I mean, I touched on that earlier, and that's the judgmental thing. It's really something that bothers me, and people, it's a fine line. You know, people say, like, you know, it's somebody that is gay, for example, and they come on my site, on my Facebook page, and they say, I love the band, and then people start attacking them. They say, I'm a gay person, and I love the band, and people say, well, how can you be gay and love the band? You know what I'm saying? It just turns into this war, and I'm just thinking, wow, the people that are attacking that person just don't get it. They're quoting scriptures and calling themselves Christians, and it's like, it's sickening, actually. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not how Christ would handle it at all if he were here in the flesh. And it bums me out. There's this really crazy judgmental spirit that's over the world in the church. And I really believe we're supposed to love everyone, obviously condemn sin, but love the person, love the sinner. And I stand by that, and I really fight for that. So.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, it's an honor to always talk to one of my childhood heroes, but I told you the last time we talked that you're one of my adult heroes also, so it's always great. Mr. Sweet, thank you for your time.
Oh, man, very kind of you, brother. I had a great time. Thank you. Excellent job. And let me know if there's anything I can ever do for you, okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Things You Won't Hear on Sunday Seacoast podcast. In the show notes, you'll see a link to our Facebook group page. Also, we'd love for you to consider subscribing so you get these episodes downloaded right when they come out. Thanks so much for listening.